G'day guys and gal, the Eye of Terror, not the holiday destination of choice. This midway point of the warp and real space was the hidey hole of the forces of chaos for over 10,000 years, full of demon worlds, warp spaghetti, and all manners of spiky shit. It was inconquerable, untamable, and unstoppable. Or was it? Could the galaxy actually close the Eye of Terror, locking Chaos's only reliable gateway to real space and dealing a huge blow to the ruinous powers? I would argue yes. Now I am aware that the Eye of Terror isn't much of an issue anymore since Cadia broke, causing the galaxy to shit the bed. The Great Rift is now the new issue, but let's pretend for a second that Abaddon wasn't a bad sport who throws meteor-sized starships at planets that he doesn't like, and discuss what methods and technologies exist that could genuinely put an end to the Eye. Before we get started, I want to shout out and show off some of the awesome Majorkill minis that have been submitted for the competition. Will did a great job with the Space Elf Deathlord. Not sure why he put them in frame with these Dark Reapers, considering, they have absolutely no connection whatsoever, but somehow it fits. Also, Overcome Life with his stunning job of the chaotic two-handed marine. Unbelievably clean paint job, and I love the glow effect. Speaking of clean, Patrice, bro, that is one sexy ass paint job. All of these and more are just some of the entries into the Majorkill painting competition, where anyone could win $500. Competition has just over a week left, so for the many of you that have your Majorkill mini, paint that shit and send it over to me. There are other cash prizes for best kit bash and most creative paint job, so even if you aren't an amazing painter, you could still win. Today we'll explore the various different methods and attempts at defeating or closing the Eye of Terror. We will discuss how effective each method is before diving into some of the other methods that could theoretically work. Then to wrap it up, we'll discuss what the consequences of closing the Eye of Terror might be. Also, this technically counts as my Halloween special, because it has the word terror in it. Let's get into it. This might surprise you, but the Imperium did actually try conquer the Eye of Terror once. To absolutely nobody's surprise, it ended in total fucking disaster. The ill-fated Abyssal Crusade, as it's called, has been covered in its own video, but basically some pea-brain dipshit High Lord decided to condemn thousands of loyal Space Marines as heretics for stupid-ass reasons, and he told them that the only way that they could redeem themselves was to yeet themselves into the Eye of Terror. They complied. Some were destroyed upon entry in a devastating space battle, others were scattered around and hunted down. Some were able to wipe out a number of demon worlds before they too were finally brought low. However, many more fell to chaos in order to survive. Only like one dude made it out alive, and he immediately killed the fuck out of the High Lord that sent them to their doom. Fair call. So it's fair to say that the Eye is pretty unconquerable. 30,000 Space Marines were sent in, and they barely made a dent. If anything, Chaos actually made a net profit from all the weapons, Space Marines, and ships they were able to get their hands on. Even if the Imperium did it smart, with a huge army, hundreds of thousands of Space Marines, a shitload of blanks to help calm down the warp spaghetti, and tactical brilliance, it still wouldn't work. Sure, they could wipe out hundreds of demon worlds, kill a shitload of traitor marines, and banish billions of demons, but the casualties would be horrific, and the Eye wouldn't just shrink because a bunch of traitor marines are now dead. The worlds within the Eye also cannot be settled down on, as eventually you will become corrupted. The best case scenario is that the traitor legions would be heavily depleted, hence there would not be any raids or Black Crusades for quite a while. But the demons would repopulate, and eventually the traitors would rebuild. The Imperium would also be vulnerable to Orc and Tyranid invasions due to their depleted military, so best case scenario, Chaos becomes less of a threat for a while, whilst Orcs, Tyranids, and other nasty Xenos become a much bigger problem. Worst case scenario, most of the Imperial Crusade dies or is corrupted, so conquering it isn't an option. What about closing it? Well, yeah, it actually is closable, despite what the pessimistic jerky lovers like to say. The first and most obvious path towards closing the literal portal to hell is the Necrons. Necrons hate the warp. They fucking hate it. During the War in Heaven, one of their end goals was to permanently separate the warp from real space, hence depriving the old ones and their creations of their greatest weapon, the Immaterium, or as the Pottersbergs like to say, some good old fun-loving magic. To achieve this goal, they created the infamous Necron pylons, like the ones on Cadia, around the galaxy. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your opinion of the war ended before all the pylons could be built, hence the warp was allowed to keep vibing in real space. The pylons that were built remained, and actually did a good fucking job. See, when the Elder aggressively penetrated each other's orifices on a galactic scale, Slaanesh was born. The birth of a Chaos God is a hell of a thing, but ironically, Slaanesh's birth was blue-balled. Because in the Necron pylons of Cadia, as well as other worlds, the warp rift that occurred due to Slaanesh's birth was massively reduced and mostly contained. Like when Cadia went kaput, the Great Rift tore half the galaxy apart and made the Eye of Terror look like the Eye of Inconvenience. If Cadia, with its hectic anti-warp fuck you pylons, didn't exist in the first place, the Great Rift could have existed from the start of the Great Crusade. So the first method to shut the Eye of Terror is to build more Necron pylons or properly activate the current ones. The Necrons have already implied that they're able to do this, and during the fall of Cadia, Trazyn helped activate the pylons, which did begin to shrink the Eye of Terror before, the planet exploded. In the non-canon Necron ending in Battlefleet Gothic 2, some random-ass Necron dynasty is able to delete the Eye of Terror without too much drama. So if anyone's going to shut the Eye, it would be the Necrons. But are they the only ones that can do it? Maybe. Mankind has been trying to shrink or even close the Eye of Terror for a while, but they didn't really make many solid attempts at it. One attempt though was quite interesting, and actually could have worked. This attempt was performed by Inquisitor Quixos. Quixos perfectly measured out a Necron pylon, then built a replica using the best material he possibly could. He then kidnapped a bunch of Alpha Plus level Psykers, and he planned on basically overloading them all at one time and supercharging his pylon, theoretically destabilizing and shutting the Eye of Terror. However, Quixos was also incredibly corrupted by the warp, and the plan easily could have backfired hard. Like, the dude had demon hosts as minions, killed millions of innocents in order to kidnap the Psykers, had literal horns sprouting from his head, was covered in demonic runes, studied an extremely heretical book about demons, and he murdered a bunch of Inquisitors that were like, bruh, what the fuck are you doing? Not to mention that his experiment was probably going to blow up the planet he was on, but knowing the Inquisition, they probably weren't too fussed by that part. Unfortunately, Quixos was killed by Inquisitor Eisenhorn before the experiment could be complete, so we aren't sure if it would have worked or not, but either way, it was a fun little thing. What about the other races? Could they shut it? Well, the Orcs probably can't, and even if they could, they wouldn't, as it gives them a good scrap. The Tau have next to no knowledge and understanding about the warp, and even less so about warp technologies, so they also aren't really a likely candidate to do much about it. You know who probably could close the Eye though? That's right, the Tyranids. In Warhammer, the races are either classed as Predator or Prey. For example, Exodite Elder are Prey, Dark Elder are Predators. The Tyranids and Chaos are at the top of the food chain, hence they don't like fighting each other, as it generally just ends in a net loss for both of them. However, the Tyranids are aware that Chaos is a threat to their biomass consumption, and they've begun working on a solution. The Tyranids Shadow and the Warp Power, that being an ability which dampens and hurts the warp around its hive fleets, is a natural counter to Chaos, who rely on the warp for power. The Tyranids have even created a new hive fleet, that being Hive Fleet Kronos, purely for fighting Chaos. This hive fleet has a much more powerful Shadow in the Warp and relies more on ranged warfare rather than melee, cause demons fucking love melee. It's been flying around the Great Rift, wiping out corrupted worlds and preventing demonic incursions when it can. Like one time it straight up rocked up to a fight between the Imperium and Chaos, and it just started attacking Chaos whilst ignoring the Imperium. The Imperium was like, alrighty then, and they bailed as soon as they could. If Hive Fleet Kronos, or a similarly equipped Hive Fleet, as Kronos was only formed after the fall of Cadia, was to get big enough and then enter into the Eye of Terror, there's a good chance that they could destabilize it and potentially even close it, especially if they are able to wipe out enough demon worlds. As for the Elder, the Dark Elder probably have the technology for it, however they can't use 95% of their tech as it requires psychic activation, and they're too proud and stubborn to give it to the Craftworld Elder. The Craftworld Elder don't currently have any tech that could do serious damage to the Eye, however the Ynnari had a small window of opportunity. If they were able to wake up Yned before the fall of Cadia, and if Yned was able to destroy Slaanesh, then it's fair to say that Slaanesh's doom could also close the Eye of Terror. Makes sense. Her birth created it, her death should destroy it. However, with GW basically spitting on the Ynnari and ruining their story, plus opening the Great Rift, that ship has sailed. So while difficult, the Eye can be closed. But what would happen if it was actually shut? There seems to be a misconception that closing the Eye of Terror would result in real space being severed from the warp, hence causing Psykers to lose their powers and making warp travel impossible. This is completely fucking wrong. Psykers, warp travel, and demons were a thing before the Eye of Terror existed, and they would continue to be a thing if it was shut. The Necrons didn't build the pylons for the Eye of Terror. They made it 60 million years earlier as a test to see if they could dampen the warp. Sure, they eventually wanted to build so many that the warp would be cut off from real space, but the Eye of Terror isn't the link between the two realms. If the Eye was shut, Chaos would take a huge L. It houses most of the Traitor Marines, as well as the Dark Mechanicum. It's also an easy way for demons to enter real space. With it gone, the Traitor Legions would scatter to various hidden worlds, likely in the Halo stars, whilst huge Chaos incursions would become a thing of the past. The forces of Hell would need to rely more on raiding and sabotage, as well as figuring out how to build Chaos portals. Chaos losing the Eye of Terror would be like the Imperium losing Terra. It's not an instant game over, but it makes life incredibly shit. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be. Only $1 per month gives you access to a boatload of Battle Mace 40 million hentai. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the real subscribe button for more terrifying content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Fuck me, I'm hungover as shit.